Hey everyone, welcome to another Buddy Study Group for Worksite Solutions. And we have been, I guess, treading over some older presentations that we've done, but I think it's always a good idea to do some of these presentations a couple times a year because as Mark and Wendy and myself are finding that the group long-term care industry and just the group industry as a whole, insurance industry as a whole, moves so darn fast that if you don't revisit and update some of your teachings for everyone, they're going to be looking at some really outdated stuff if you haven't had a presentation on it in 6 months. So for us, it's time to revisit the sales process for group long-term care. We'll kind of go step by step, give our tips and tricks and just a general insights into how each step of the sales process goes for you guys. And beyond just the industry progressing, beyond just our experience progressing and our ability to teach on it, but we've got a lot of new tools to support you in those steps of the process. So we'll kind of slide those in there to give you an idea of when we actually pull out those tools for the job. And, feel free to ask questions, even if you want to lead off with any questions that you have about the sales process. But we'll go step by step. Feel free to interrupt us. Feel free if you're working on a group case and you're in a certain step of the process, feel free to let us know where you're feeling stuck or if you have any questions. Um, so a lot of these items are going to be tried and true, right? A lot of these things not only apply to group, but individual long-term care as well. I think that's really where we started teaching on the sales process is relating it to individual long-term care because we've got a lot of long-term care specialists in this audience. But step by step, I mean, we've talked about this piece a lot, but just learning to identify groups is, I think, a step in the process itself. It's obviously very preliminary, but I think for those who appreciate being on the call but don't feel like they have a group opportunity yet or don't know how to go out and sort of find one or begin that process, I think it's a worthy step to look at. We've talked about groups that tend to be really good candidates for long-term care. So we've talked about, obviously companies in the caregiving industry or companies that just get it around long-term care, just like the individual side, people who've been through long-term care before or are currently immersed in some sort of extended care situation or by proxy, generally just kind of understand the need for long-term care better and tend to make better clients. Same thing on the group side. Companies that are in the caregiving industry or companies with executives who are going through some sort of long-term care situation. We talk about long-term care being a really long sales cycle sometimes because people need to start to become aware of and really truly understand the need to be able to feel comfortable with making a decision with moving forward with long-term care. Kind of shortens up that sales cycle when you've got folks who are right front and center of the long-term care issue. We also talk about just culturally companies that offer, um, employer paid benefits tend to be a really good fit. We've talked over and over about how important employer funding is to the group long-term care sale, to participation, to offers you may get to the carrier, and so on and so forth. So that's definitely a really good start. White collar groups that have that income or companies that focus around really strong benefits for key partners, law firms, um, you know, doctors, dentist office, things like this tend to be really good opportunities for group long-term care. But there is something to be said for how you make that approach. And Mark, I think you're really good at making that approach and starting that conversation. And this is not just you were able to book a meeting with someone or you've got a LinkedIn presence, so somebody's booked a call with you, but you've successfully brought group long-term care to a lot of our friends of Buddy INS, in our couple of years of doing it. So how do you approach that conversation specifically when it's somebody you're really close to, because I know
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who have a group relationship that's right on the outskirts of that sphere of influence, and they may not know how to start that conversation.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Jason. It's not natural for me. So I hope
It's
that
not
gives you guys
natural for
some
anyone.
comfort. Yeah, I mean, you really have to practice it, and really it's consultative. So you do have to listen and respond to what the person in front of you is telling you their situation is. You have to be able to listen well. And that's a challenge for me too. So, I'm sure, in the sales side of many of you have experienced this is telling is not selling, right? It's not going to help you move somebody forward. So the way that I connect it, the story that I'm telling involves caregivers. So when I do webinars, Jason and Wendy's seen this. On my first slide, it's always there are 50 million family caregivers. So I'm like throwing out this idea. Did you know there are 50 million family caregivers? And just letting people respond to that. What does that mean? What is a caregiver? And then it leads to this conversation of, did you know that professional care is an alternative or a solution? You don't have to have family members take care of you. So it's really just like really setting an LTC 101 that, yes, you can hire a home care agency to help you through this. Oh, and by the way, we work with Amada Senior Care, who's a great community partner who can provide those resources to you if you're currently in that situation as a caregiver. So having solutions top of mind when you are hearing the feedback about, yes, I'm in a caregiving situation. What do I do? What are my options? You don't have to have insurance to get help with professional care. And it's really important to kind of decouple this a little bit. I know we're
Yep.
offering insurance, but if somebody's in a caregiving situation today with father, their father's not going to be able to get long-term care insurance, most likely, right?
Right.
But how do we help that client still get to a solution that's going to provide professional care? We're solving problems for them still. And then you get down the path of there's a way to plan for long-term care so you can have the stage established for your own professional care or for an assisted living facility, right? Because a lot of people want a community setting when they retire as well, meaning you have choice, you have quality of life. So you're leading down this path that we all know about how to set the stage. But as long as you kind of key in on the fundamental 101 of this, you'll notice I mentioned nothing about insurance really yet. It's all about how do we fund professional caregiving? Oh, and there's a way to leverage an insurance company's dollars to do this. Let me show
Yep.
you how that works.
And I
And
think
those are
where
the
people
smaller
might
points.
get in their own head, Mark,
Yeah.
is they're thinking about how to ask, do you have group long-term care insurance when really you need to sort of reevaluate the approach. Or maybe they're waiting to be asked about like how's work? How are things going on that front? Oh, well, I just started working with group long-term care benefit, things like that. I think what you're saying about decoupling it
Right.
from insurance kind of keeps your head from constantly focusing on I need to make a sale here,
That's
right?
right. And your client, it disarms them in a positive way because they're expecting you as a benefit broker or an insurance provider to be selling them something. And when you're coming in asking questions, providing solutions that are not related to insurance, they'll let their guard down. They'll build that trust factor, and then they'll kind of lead you to where you need to go. That's the really interesting thing is they're going to ask you about insurance because they know you're an expert in it. And if they have their guard up and they're like, I don't want to talk about this, it's okay to wait till there's a better moment and to not proceed down that path. Just don't barrel through it. Listen to them and gauge what they're interested in.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's super important, and it's a law of large numbers thing too, right? I think keeping tunnel vision on one group who you think is the really great opportunity
Mhm.
is really going to, I think it's going to hurt you mentally, right? You get your expectations up, you get your hopes and dreams up about selling this dream group, but I think really it's about feeling comfortable in that conversation so that you can have it multiple times,
Mhm.
over and over and over until you find the right match. And I
Mhm.
think that's what, um, you know, I think that's what folks need to understand a little bit more about group long-term care is that it really requires the right fit. So I don't think it's a good exercise to try to mold the group in front of you to be a right fit. It's about constantly going out on those journeys till you find the right fit. Because when you have it, you know it. And when
Mhm.
you have it, the results are much more pleasing for everybody involved, right? At the end of the day. So I think trying to shoehorn it is not necessarily the approach, but really just go out there and keep looking until you find those proper fits.
Yeah, and a lot of this is about timing, as we all know, right? These cases take time, 6, 12, 24 months. So from my perspective, one of our best assets is our marketing and our marketing team. Having a list that you keep people on, hey, are you do you okay if I add you to my list to get information on a monthly basis? That's going to be your 12th man, as I call it, right? Your extended team that's 24/7 that's going to ping them. And when they're ready to talk about this, they are going to respond to that at the right time. So you don't have to be wondering, should I be reaching out to this person? You have the initial conversation, you establish trust, they know you're not salesy, right? You're consultative about this. When those issues come up, they're going to think of you and you're going to be top of mind for them. So you
Yep.
really do have to leverage marketing if you want to scale, and I think given long-term care and how few long-term care specialists are out there, you want to be as broad as possible, in multiple states potentially, and the ability to reach a larger audience because they're not going to necessarily have local providers that can help them.
Yeah, and it brings me back to a couple of Diane's really good study groups that she's done. She helps us with a lot of presentations on marketing, outreach, things of that nature. And one of the big themes of what she talks about is you're not the only person and not the only priority in these folks' lives, especially when you're talking groups, when you're talking human resources. I don't think we give enough credit to how busy they really are day in and day out and how many things they have to be on the ball on, right? But I think being there in a consultative way, um, like you said, allows them to take action when they're ready and reminds them that you're still there, but you're not still there pinpricking them every time. You're just kind of dropping in, here's a new piece of information that I thought you would find important because even if it's not the right time, I know this is something that you're thinking about that is important to you, right? So I think it's a lot of principles that just overlap with the individual side and just with insurance in general and the right approach there.
And I would say, people that are low-hanging fruit are those that have already explored insurance before. Maybe they already have a group plan in place that's dormant, things of this nature, but they're going to come in also with a lot of misconceptions because they learned something in the past that may no longer be true, right? Or the type of product we're offering, or the guaranteed issue, or a lot of these things are going to really surprise and delight them, quite frankly. But you have to understand that that's the challenge with the low-hanging fruit too, is you have to re-educate.
Yep. Paradigm shift. I think you can find that especially with brokers who have been around for a while, especially because they have seen a phase of the market where there was guaranteed issue group long-term care. They have seen an era where there no longer is guaranteed issue group long-term care, and now you're exposing them to this new group market. And there's a number of things that have changed besides just guaranteed issue is back, which you're right, will surprise and delight them. But also learning that it's really a hybrid long-term care dominated market now. It's not a traditional long-term care market anymore. You know, Unum is not really offering their long-term care plan to new hires. Maybe people are used to working with, with LifeSecure, who has really kept kind of their market exposure very, very minimal as of now. So having to retrain them on products, how to position them, and really what the terms are of some of these new products and how they work mechanically. You're right, it's a huge paradigm shift because you can't just apply what was going on back then to today, right? And even though we may see traditional products come back, even that is going to be a completely new sort of marketplace and product offering, most likely.
Yeah, and even in that space, what I see sometimes folks that are specialists making a mistake on is getting too into the weeds. You really have to help them understand how this does relate to what they're used to as well, right? Even if it's a hybrid, we're still focused on how much long-term care benefit do you get for your dollar.
Right.
That conversation is not different. How much am I going to pay? How much am I going to get? Really simple concepts and sticking to those simple concepts. LTC Planning 101, like we talked about, but then this is how you fund professional caregiving. And here's why these products are so popular. Here's what the guarantees are, right? Which again is one of those misconceptions that you're going to help to demystify. Oh, yeah, the premiums are guaranteed on these. I've heard there are rate increases.
Right.
Can't contractually get a rate increase here. So those are the kind of things of keeping it simple, not worrying too much about, like exactly what offer you're going to get from which carrier. I know we talk a lot about carriers and product and things like that in this group, but for the client, they're not going to get too attached to one name or one particular structure. They're just going to try to understand what is this going to do for me and for my employees. And a lot of
Right.
times you're going to be talking to business owners and working with small groups, right? And that marketplace is opening up now. So that's really the conversation that you should be thinking about is how do I simplify this concept and also make it easy for them to understand how to move forward. If you bring in too much complexity, that's going to lead to the decision paralysis by analysis here that you have to avoid, especially early on in the conversation. The goal of your first meeting should be to establish that this is something that is of interest to them, right? That this is not what they thought it would be, and this is kind of exciting to have a second conversation about. You probably don't want to go too deep early on because you might end up getting them too paralyzed to actually take the next steps.
Yeah, and I think that kind of plays directly into what we would call the next step is like the interested group discussion. We've identified our groups, we've kind of had a conversation, but we've gotten them into a call now where we're actually discussing. Well, let's see. We've got a question in the chat from Carly. I think it's a good one. Can you talk about GI and some of the parameters? Are you asking, is that a good thing to bring up on the first call, or are you asking for that actual information?
Yeah, I would basically keep it simple to say, hey, we know we can get an approval for any group down to 3 employees. And what makes it work is the fact that if you're funding a base plan, at least for your employees, we know we're going to hit the minimum participation to make it successful. So that's how we would talk about it with the client. But that's also the one thing that you guys should know in your back pocket is you don't have to have a specific offer in hand to talk to them about that fact because we've never had a group been not approved for an offer. I mean, it's bound to happen at some point, but we work with a lot of groups, and none of them have been turned down that meet that parameter. So most of the carriers are quite willing to approve virtually any group down to that level, those minimums.
So if you have a group of, say, 4 partners and maybe, 10 employees, but maybe they just want to start by covering the partners, we can do that. And
Yes.
okay, and still it would be 3 minimum, or you with that smaller group, you want all 4.
Yes, we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but for the carrier, which is Allstate Benefits, by the way, that goes down to 3, they're going to require them to have at least 6 applications, which basically means you're buying a long-term care product and usually coupling it with like an accident product.
We're
So
critical
each,
illness.
so you'll have at least, like 2 products that you're purchasing for 3 or 4 partners in this case to hit their minimum. But we
And
can
are
get
there,
that strategy in place because the accident policy is very inexpensive.
uh-huh,
So they're not going to
okay,
really worry too much about the cost of that.
And the other
great.
thing, Carly, oftentimes they'll go, well, we've got 4, but does the 5 count if we bring in spouses? And the answer is no. So
Okay,
it has to be those that are working at that site. And some
okay.
you can bring later on, but yes. And we do this a lot with small groups because there are 3 or 4, but to bring in those ancillary products, which many of them, Carly, don't have. So they look at that as a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Great. And then is there any ceiling on age?
There is a ceiling to get the long-term care riders, and I would say a good general remark is 70, age 70. So you have
Okay.
18 to age 70. You have a pretty broad range there. But if are you working with a business owner and they're the key person and they're over 70, that's where, I'd be a little bit more cautious because it'll be hard to get them access to the long-term care rider specifically.
Okay. I have a couple more questions, but I'll
Go
Yeah.
just
for it.
email you.
No, those are great
No,
questions. And
this
each
helps
carrier is
everybody
different
learn.
too.
So
Yeah.
even like as long as you feel comfortable asking them,
Yeah,
I'd
I
say
feel
now's a
very
good time.
comfortable.
Okay.
Okay, so I do have this financial planning firm and total ally in the LTC field. And they do have four partners and I think it's like eight employees. They want to start just with the partners, but
Mhm.
I know one of the partners is actually over 70. So could this group still get it? And maybe would that person over 70 either be underwritten or could not be included in that group? How would that work?
Yeah, I would suggest focusing on the broader group because again, their plans aren't designed for individuals. They're going to want you to offer it to, as broad a group as possible. You can just carve out the partners and the three partners. For that fourth one, we have to look specifically at the carrier and the health, if there are health conditions for that person. But if that's the main motivating force to do the entire group, then that is a group I'd be cautious about.
That's not the main motivating
Okay.
requirement. I know that they're going to be, this group in particular will be a little bit reticent to cover everyone at this moment, simply because they actually are incredibly generous and already pay 100% of very generous health benefits for the
Mhm.
employees and the spouses. So I think they're just going to want to start small before they make that other commitment.
For sure. And one of the things that helps them is like say they come in thinking about it for the three partners that are under age 70, you can show them what the base plan costs. And maybe it costs, $50 per partner per month. That can help them get comfortable with the affordability for the other employees as well. Because they might come in thinking long-term care, that's going to be expensive. We know the health insurance is already expensive for employee, but if it's $50 is not very expensive for them, they may say that's nothing. We'll just do this for everyone anyway, and maybe give the partners a higher level of coverage. So that kind of opens that door to that conversation once you start to show them some numbers. And Jason, that'd be probably a good segue to show the group quick quote because Carly, you
Yeah.
can go into the buddy system and actually see what the numbers are for yourself. Um, and what
Okay.
state, Carly, are you working in here?
This is California.
Okay. So, and maybe actually, Jason, why don't you start with the group product buddy because we'll actually do a carrier analysis first.
Yeah, so this is you're doing an awesome segue for us. So this is essentially how we would prepare for cases or prepare for conversations. Like if we're having that real first conversation beyond just kind of keeping it high level with the group, I would come in here, choose my state, know we've got an employer group, and I know, let's just call it 5 to 49 employees for now. I mean, Allstate is the only one who's going to really be able to hit this size segment in California right now.
Mhm.
Transamerica not available in California, and of course, Chubb, Trustmark are going to take really 100 plus. So the only game in town is a really good game in town, thankfully. So this is going to be my one pager. So you can actually have this in your back pocket for the conversation, and you can even use this to walk them through the product guarantees, the product features, understanding that, you know, you know the gravity as the long-term care specialist of having a 5% compound inflation protection rider at this kind of
Definitely.
premium, right? So you'll be able to walk them through the eligibility. You can see we have ages 18 to 70 here. One little extra note, up to age 80, you can access the whole life benefit, no long-term care. So we just kind of put it in long-term care terms, showing 18 to 70. But then there are some other kind of extra items I've put in here for the size segment. So it's already noted here that we got to look at one other voluntary benefit product. And for for 5 to 9 employees, we may not have simplified issue underwriting from Allstate for their offer. We'll still have a GI offer, but we may not have access to simplified issue underwriting. So that's
Okay.
the merit to even on a voluntary basis offering to those other employees, even if they're not going to be funded at the end of the day. Still a good
Okay.
idea to show them, how cost effective it can be for even just the lowest level of coverage to fund somebody. But even if they're not interested, again, being able to access simplified issue underwriting allows even the executives that they may fund to buy up into simplified issue amounts if it would
Right.
push them over 9 employees, right? So
Right.
sample pricing is also here, but this is kind of your one pager for the conversation. And as long as you can kind of talk them through how, kind of your typical benefit buddy snip works, this
Yeah.
is what I would use as kind of my conversation tool. So for a 45-year-old employee, we're looking at $184 a month. If we're looking at a claim age of 70, just hypothetically, they put 55,000 into this plan overall, but from a total benefit standpoint, they're able to access 483,000 for long-term care by their age of 70. And even if they use the death benefit that they purchased for long-term care services, Allstate is going to restore that death benefit 100%. So when you look at it from a total benefit standpoint, they're looking at 10.1 times their dollar in total insurance coverage. So that's how we're generally presenting that. And then you can see the effect of the inflation protection growth on the monthly access amount as well, which is 6% per month. So,
So this is very compelling, and this is something that, being a financial advisor, my friend and potential client will definitely, he'll be able to grasp this very quickly. So what could I offer to that partner who happens to be over 70?
so I think that may be your opportunity to look at one-to-one white glove individual planning with that
Hmm.
employee. But if they're between 70 and 80, there is a whole life offering here. Of course, anything else outside of maybe, like an Equitrust bridge, um,
Sure.
you
Yeah,
know,
I would look at also Bankers Life.
that's
Okay.
true. Bankers is a compelling option too.
So where would I find information
So
on the whole life option with Allstate?
Yeah, so outside of the one pager,
Uh-huh.
you can actually take them through the group quick quote, which is generally the next step in the process we recommend after group product buddy. And we have Allstate here, the 5% inflation for California and Utah. You can select that and you can actually give really quickly the total cost to fund just the executive group or even to fund all employees. So if
so
we know
so
the
Carly,
ages,
I would break it into the 70 and under group, and that's what
Hmm.
you're going to use this tool for. And
mhm,
then,
Hmm.
like Jason was saying, look at that other person individually to start with, separately.
Okay.
yeah.
Anybody over
Okay.
70.
Okay.
So let's say if you have ages of the executives, I'm happy to plug it in and just kind of show you how I do things.
Or just like
I
a
I don't have them
ballpark.
off to handy. Oh,
Yeah.
the ballpark, I would say like maybe 48, 53,
I'll write it down.
56. Okay.
48, 53, 56.
And remember,
And
the point of this exercise is not to make this a science. It's really to give you a high level estimate of what to expect the total employer funded to cost. And I would round it up just to under promise and over deliver. Quote a higher
sure,
price because this is not like an
sure,
official quote. It's just, is that a price range that would be you'd be comfortable with?
sure. And
Right.
then yeah, one more who's like 62.
Okay. So
And you
I would
can
just go, yeah, go
and
ahead.
you can just do a range share, where you put in the youngest person here, 48, you put in the oldest person, 62, and guess where the other ones are going to land, right? In between that. So
Sure.
it's just easy to kind of give an estimate just by doing a couple of people and then just multiplying it.
Yeah, and
Okay.
we're starting just at the lowest benefit amount, but let's start at say 25,000 even. If we look at a 48-year-old, we're looking at 72 a month. We look at a 64-year-old, we're running about 206 a month.
Okay.
And even if we look at just 53 and 56, we've got 99 a month and 122 a month.
Okay.
And when you add those all up, we get 171.
I get it. It's very
Four
appealing,
ninety nine a month is
right?
about what so $500 a month for that group.
I
Okay.
think
And they can
if
add their spouse or partners. I understand they don't count as part of the equation, but they can still, we can quote for them.
correct.
Yep,
Yeah, the
Okay.
only thing that's going to be variable is how much guaranteed issue they can get as a maximum.
correct.
Okay.
And for spouses, generally speaking, we get about 20,000 guaranteed issue with Allstate.
Okay.
And there may be, depending on the size of the group, they may be able to do a simplified issue higher amount above that.
Okay.
And that becomes really compelling with 5% compound, right? Well, far more compelling than saying we can give you 20,000 face amount without any inflation protection. So it's actually, it looks really nice in California. And
Okay.
just a tip here, if we're looking at, say, a 25,000 benefit amount, if I wanted to know, so we came up with about $500 a month for this group at the 25,000 level. If we just double the benefit amount, we can just double the premium cost. So it'd be about $1,000 a month to fund everybody at the 50,000 level because the pricing is almost completely linear.
Great. Tell me if I'm going over. I'm just curious, like regarding like when you talk about the limits that we be able to get in terms of the benefit, is that something that how much expectations can I set for them in terms of pre-qualification can I do versus kind of putting it all in and finding out at the end?
What I would do is that group product buddy, that PDF that Jason showed you,
Uh-huh.
we generally set that at where we commonly see the maximum guaranteed issue to be.
Okay.
So if you start there, you're generally going to be in safe territory and under promising, over delivering. So when it says 75,000 death benefit, take that to be the GI maximum for the employees to start. And then when we do the RFP, we can always request more, and sometimes the carriers will approve higher amounts, especially with the employer funding. Once you get the employer funding commitment, everything becomes easier. Both the enrollment as well as the carrier's sponsorship of this, right? Their support of this, they typically don't see employer funding. So they're delighted when it's already paid for a lot of the coverage. They know
Mm-hmm.
they're going to have a successful case, like you're going to have a successful case. So you can use that to actually negotiate higher limits. But this piece will give you kind of what you'll be safe. You won't have to backtrack from this.
Hey,
This is
Great.
all
Mark,
All right.
committed. Yeah.
uh, Mark, could you add in, because I've had a couple of this happen within the group, as you know, but could you talk about the ER funding? And I've had a couple again that have said, gee, we can do ER funding, the company's going to pay for it, but after a year, we might not. How do you approach that with these groups to say, look, you need to take care of this every year? Why is this different than health insurance that they do pay every year for?
At the end of the day, I like to say yes. I like to give the client what they want. And if the client says, I want to fund this for 1 year, there's ways to make that work as well. Usually, what I would recommend is you have everybody pay for it directly through an ACH, usually, and then the employer just bonuses them for that first year, the amount they paid, kind of as an incentive to participate. If they're going to commit to it each year, I'd probably just have the employer pay it directly instead of doing it that way. How do you convince them to do more than that? Uh, Again, if there's a lot of friction and they're not going to do it at all, I would take what you can get. If you think that they just don't understand the value of it, you have to obviously kind of convey what's the value of paying for it and not taking away a benefit that you're offering. Most employers don't want to feel like I've given you something and now I'm taking it away from you. So you just have to think about how they want to do that. But I don't know, Wendy, I'm easy. I'm like, tell me what you want to
Yes,
do and we'll do it for you.
yes, you
Let's
bet.
get this going.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And once you get the education going, once they see the response from the employees to it, a lot of times they're going to say, like, you know what? This was a really great program. It was more than I thought it would be, and maybe I will pay this every year. Sometimes you got to earn that too. But if they have the right conditions to start with, I would say yes. Now, where I do push back, Wendy, I'm not that easy, is if they say they won't fund it at all, then it's not going to be successful for them.
Yeah.
And I just tell them that this will not be successful because you won't hit the minimum participation. We have a lot of experience with this. We would suggest you wait until you have a better opportunity because, it's not the right time to do this then. And you have to be able to say no in those situations. Because
Yep.
if nobody signs up, then why do we all spend our time doing this, including the employer? Or if the
Right.
carrier says we're not going to offer you the coverage because you didn't hit our minimum participation. But when we say the employer funding gets them to waive the participation requirements, they get relaxed. They're like, oh, thank goodness. I don't have to worry about that. Especially when they deal with other benefits, they know that what a hassle that can be and what a, anxiety that can be. So, like I said, it's all a win for the client and you're on their team helping them achieve what they're trying to achieve there.
100%. And Chris asks a good question. What percentage of the monthly is the employer on the hook for? Maybe 50%? And that actually brings up another potential flexibility that we've seen with employer funding, where maybe an employer isn't paying the entire monthly cost for the group of employees they're funding, but we've actually seen an employer
That's a pretty
incentivize a
cool.
purchase and subsidize a purchase by a certain percentage amount. So it does bring light, Chris, to the fact that you can kind of work it in a way where you're subsidizing an employee's purchase of a long-term care plan by, say, 30% of the premium or 50% of the premium. It's rarer.
Yeah, I
Um,
I used to be a little bit more creative about that stuff, Jason. I've tended to go away from that approach as we've gotten more experience with it.
yeah,
The most common approach is selecting a benefit amount they pay for and then allowing people to buy up.
right.
And there's reasons why you get most participation that way.
Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, if you're only subsidizing a percentage of a purchase, you still have to have a voluntary purchase to make that happen, right? It does sweeten the deal. There's no denying that, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like a voluntary light
You should have
mode.
like a real reason for doing it though, for sure. You
Yes.
should default to just doing the base plan with the buy up. It's also going to make the enrollment a whole lot easier for you. So there's some like practical implications to how you enroll the groups where that approach being the standard, the most commonplace, our enrollment platform and any other enrollment platforms you might use may not allow you to do it the other way that easily. The billing becomes more complex as well. You just have to think about the downstream impacts of what you recommend. And that's why I'd stick to the standard there unless you have a really compelling reason not to.
Yeah, so Chris, the answer is almost all the time 100%, but they again have a choice over how many people they're covering at 100% and to what benefit level. And carriers will ask you about funding a couple of different ways. Are they going to fund a per employee per month amount, or are they going to fund at a certain benefit level? So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to slice up employer funding, but generally, we're seeing the employer, for whoever they're covering, pay 100% of the premium.
Yeah, and you have to put it in context for them too. When we did the Carly's case study there, and Jason came up with $500 per partner per month, that type of thing. Let's say there were the four partners. That's $125 per person. They're probably spending 500, $1,000 plus on the major medical health insurance. So to me, a lot of it has to do with getting them to a budget that they're comfortable with
Right.
and putting it in perspective. If it's $100 add-on to $1,000 they already pay for the health insurance, that may actually not be a huge burden for them, especially when they're the owners of the company and they're just paying for it for themselves using the company checkbook instead of paying it out of pocket. So they're not really doing something that they wouldn't have spent some money on otherwise. They're just getting the guaranteed issue and the value of having a group plan where they can't get that on the individual market, the same type of product.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anybody else have any other questions on just the product buddy, quick quote,
Oh,
and
I wanted you to show you one more thing, Jason, while you were in the buddy system, which is
Mhm.
also one of the new tools. So there were a lot of good, good questions in the chat. And I like literally just copied Carly's question into the AI advisor just to see what it would give. I think that's a good exercise, right? I know a lot of you have questions. That's a good starting point. It's not the be all end all. It's not the gospel truth to what the answer is, but it's a good way to kind of like start on the road. Even before you come to us with questions, go to the AI advisor and ask and see what it points you to. It will obviously also send you a link to the group um, sales guide. where you can dive deeper in some of these things too. So you don't have to like wait for our answers. You can confirm it with us, but I would start there. That will teach you a whole lot just asking it questions.
I'm curious as to whether or not you got an answer that is satisfying to you.
I did. I thought it was interesting. Plug it in and see what happens. Don't be afraid.
Would you like to show us
Sure,
if you got a good answer?
I do. And I just lower copy and pasted with no context whatsoever, right? I put in literally the copy of what Carly put in there, right? It was just like kind of a partial phrase here. So it's not going to even know exactly what she's talking about right here. I said, can you talk about GI and some of the parameters? I didn't mention group. I didn't mention Allstate. I didn't mention anything else. And here's kind of some basic things it said, right? Which is kind of what we were talking about. So again, high level, it was satisfying for me, Jason.
Yeah, I would say that's a decent place to start. If you're looking for perfection, you won't necessarily find it, but you're going to get some really good pieces of insight that will take you to the next level of the discussion. And it's always going to link you to the next follow-up resource that you can track down. Mainly the group sales guide that you can check for specific carrier information that we keep up to date. And it's just going to get better and better as you keep talking to it. It's the world's smartest toddler. So, good deal. Anybody have any other questions on this step of the sales process? So this is really us using the tools and preparing ourselves for the conversation. These are our study tools. We kind of, rehearse what we're going to talk about, what exercises we're going to go through. I've even seen some people start taking screenshots of the group quick quote and using that to just send along to someone. Hey, here's, a ballpark figure of what this may cost for a 3-employee group. Somebody did it for a 3-employee group. Plugged them right in, took screenshots of all 3 of them in the group quick quote, and sent them off and said, here are some ballpark numbers as to what it would cost to fund the 3 of you. And, from what I've heard, that was relatively successful. So that's really just kind of our study moment. But then, Mark, we're generally taking the conversation to obviously showing them these ballpark numbers, and then we have to go shop the market, right? I mean, generally, Product Buddy is helping us trim down how many carriers we're really going to be looking at. We may be in a comparative situation, but then we got to kind of warm them up to the fact that we have to go and get a formal proposal.
Yeah, I think the key thing though is making the sale is really in that conversation.
It is.
So you are like 90% of the way to making the sale. If you got them excited about wanting to do it, you have the funding secured. Really, the rest of it is just implementation. It's how do we do this, not should we do this.
Right.
And then again, that's where you can pull us into that process to go through the how steps. But literally, Jason, like you were saying, you're doing basically a 1-page, we call it RFP, request for proposal. That's where you're going to get the actual official offer from the carrier. And then you can kind of sharpen the pencil and figure out the details. You don't even need to know how much coverage they're going to fund. You just need to know that they're committed to at least funding the minimum amount.
Yep.
And then once you get the proposal, you can see what the maximum guaranteed issue it's available and show them a range. And we do all of that for you when you're working with us to help implement the group. We do that analysis with you and for you. So again, I wouldn't worry too much, Jason, about, how do I do all of these next steps on my own? I would just say, like, once you've sold that case 90% of the time, you're good. Then just, kind of lay out a roadmap to help them.
Grab a census somewhere in there too, if you can.
That's right.
That's a good
get the
start.
census. That's again how we can get the RFP. Good
That's
point.
your ultimate kind of show of interest too. I'm willing to entrust you with this data about my employees to go get me a proposal, right? That's a show of trust and interest at the end of the day.
And I think also that I've found with group over the last couple of years here is I can't say it enough, and it's the same on the individual side, is that relationship. I've had BGAs, I've had clients of BGAs say, Wendy, we could have easily gone somewhere else, but we went to you because you continue to follow up, you continue to make yourself available. And that doesn't mean that you have to do everything, but that relationship is everything. We brought a lot certainly at Buddy because of the relationships that we've cultivated. So don't ever underestimate the power of that. As long as they know that they can trust you, they know you're going to do what you say, and you're going to follow them through that path. You're going to be that account manager. You are going to oversee that and be a part of that. I'm telling you, the weight off their shoulders is like, oh my God. And again, it's not that you have to do everything. Get them to the point they trust you. They like what they're seeing. They honor what you're bringing to them, and you just take them through it. Because that, I think, to me, is the number one thing that I've found when I've cultivated relationships with the groups that I'm with.
Yeah, being responsive goes such a long way. And being quick
Huge.
to respond, even if it's like, let me get back to you on that, the fact that you communicated that quickly is going to put you over the top versus any competition you have as well.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sorry, just checking in to say that there are no updates right now, but I'll let you know as soon as I have one. That was one of the big tips that Lori Martin gave us on one of her last study groups she did here. I follow up to say there's no updates. Even if there's no updates, I'm just checking in to say, hey, there's no updates. That little bit can even go a long way, right?
Yeah. Chris put this link in the chat to a nice article. A friend of Buddy INS wrote that, Noel Evans. So shout out to Noel there. But one thing I will mention is when you hear the group market, most carriers and brokers are thinking large groups, or at least mid-sized groups, right? 100 plus employees. But there is this small group market, which is relatively new. And again, it might take a little bit of a different approach to it. Again, you're working with the influencers, decision makers directly, like Carly's working directly with the financial advisors and the partners directly. So I don't think it really changes your approach too much. Just be aware that it's a little bit easier, more controllable to work with a small group, right? You don't have to make it overly complicated. If you're working with a large group, again, those can be great opportunities too, but you do want to go in there with a plan for how to enroll and a strategy which will help you with.
Yeah. And I got a good question. Hi, Jason. Would a group long-term care policy satisfy a possible opt-out for a long-term care state tax, such as in Washington? And I guess that just is a good sidebar as to if we position that on calls, how we position that on
Mhm.
calls, and really just kind of the fact that we don't know for sure at the end of the day. Um, if one plan or another is going to qualify because we just don't know the rules yet, and we just don't have any other state that is for sure putting something in place. But I think the language that we can give around that is kind of saying that something has happened in Washington in 2021, what we learned from that experience, and saying that there is no guarantee that it's going to happen in other states. Right now, it's just rumors and conjecture and a small bit of movement legislatively. But what are your thoughts there, Mark? What do you
Well, if that's the
generally?
only reason they're interested in buying long-term care insurance, it's not a good case.
Yeah,
That's my first thought.
yeah. Oh, agreed.
Um, if this is a reason why they might want to implement it now instead of next year, then it's a good reason because
Yep.
that's always a good thing to do is to do this sooner and not wait, right? Because a lot of things can change if you wait. But the bottom line, I agree with you 100%. Is I don't even say like conjecture and some of those things. I say like, here's what happened in Washington. They based the opt-out based on the state definition of what's long-term care insurance. And with whatever state you're working in, let's say it's California, the product's filed with the state as long-term care insurance. It's likely to qualify if there's a payroll tax. I just
That's
keep
really
it
it.
really simple.
If it's even brought up at the end of the day. I
Yeah, and
mean,
usually you're bringing it up more than the client's bringing it up. I don't think there's a broad awareness. There isn't a lot going on right now at the state level. The last I heard, just to give you an idea, was because of the wildfires that happened a few months ago and all of the property and casualty insurance issues, right? Because there's a shortage of carriers. The Department of Insurance has got their hands full dealing with that right now.
yeah.
So they're not necessarily taking on long-term care at the moment until they solve that crisis at hand, right? But that doesn't mean that it won't pick up momentum or steam or, something even next year. It's just I think this is what happens, right? Is something else has the attention of everybody at the moment.
So I would say, as an answer to that question, potentially. In our experience, there have been plans that are on the list that qualified in the case of Washington. Um, and at the end of the day, I think it's a good talking point for groups who are going to do this anyway as a way to do it sooner when they have maximum options, as opposed to waiting and finding themselves in a situation where they're shopping on Christmas Eve at Macy's and all the registers are closed because we saw in our experience a lot of carriers exiting, right? So we've seen plans that were group plans qualify for Washington State's kind of creditable coverage list. And better safe than sorry with 7702B is quite likely. Can you confirm that the Allstate plan is portable? Yes, it is. Confirmed.
I actually put that into the AI advisor again, not to be glib about this. I just want to show this as an example. Here's an interesting thing, Jason, that I learned. It first interpreted that to say moving out of state, which a lot of people do make that
Mm.
misconception, right? And I said, well, can an employee take it with them when they leave as portable? Then it said, like, yes, it's designed to be portable. Now, again, this is not going to be 100% accurate. Again, that's why I want you to check your work here. We link you to that group section so that you can kind of explore more into the sales guides just to look at specifics there. But again, that's a great way to get those quick answers as well.
Yeah. But yeah, to my knowledge, all of the carriers that we are working with on the group side, fully portable plans, whether you separate from your employer, are fired, retire, decide you want to go somewhere new, it's an individual certificate as soon as you are enrolled and approved. So that is a huge advantage. I think that's a talking point that many people don't have at the top of their list to bring up, but that's one of the first things I'm bringing up if I'm on an initial call with somebody, especially linked to an employer or speaking with a broker, is that these plans, beyond just the guaranteed issue, they're portable. You can take them with you. They're individual certificates. In employer-funded cases, the employee will have to take over the premium for themselves to take it with them. So there is that piece, but it is fully portable.
Yeah, and the premium doesn't change, which is another,
That is
I
correct.
think, wow factor. I think what it comes down to is most people you're talking to are going to be surprised at how flexible and how beneficial the contract terms are there.
Yep, 100%. Well, I mean, we've taken this nearly. Yeah, go ahead, Wendy.
No, and you guys never forget the unisex pricing. I mean, all these
Correct.
other things are great, and they are, and I totally agree with you guys. But that unisex pricing, how many times we come against that and go against it, and all of a sudden they're like, wait, because they're so used to women
Mhm.
paying so much more. So when you bring that in, they can't
Right.
believe.
Yeah, and I think it depends on what types of groups you're talking to,
Oh,
right? If you're talking to
absolutely.
all male groups, it might not
Oh
affect them,
yeah,
but it
right.
does help their spouses too.
I was gonna say now, Mark.
Yeah. Yeah. But here's a good way to position it too, is they might ask, because the group policy does have a discount. So it
Right.
doesn't have a discount, but because it's unisex price, women are effectively getting a lower price than they would typically get on the individual market. So you do have like answers to those common questions because of unisex pricing too. So that's a really great point, Wendy.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mark.
So we brought this just about near the top of the hour, and we haven't even talked about what happens after they say yes. So we'll definitely have another study group where we kind of revisit that side, the sold group process. You know, I also think there is opportunity for another marketing or communication session somewhere down the line. We've done one pretty recently, and I know Gretchen and Joe are incredibly busy folks, so we want to bring them in every once in a while. But we're on our sales presentations showing off their marketing pieces as a way to say, here's a look into what the experience is going to be like for employees when the enrollment kicks off. Even pre-sale, we may, demo some of those landing pages or give them an idea of the rate calculator, just to give them an idea that there's a lot of education, there's a lot of self-service materials, and it's really a great place for employees to come in and learn about their benefits. And you've got a company that you're going to be working with that really cares and puts a lot of effort into employee education and engagement there. So I wanted to give a shout to that as we're talking about the sales process, because that's an item we use as well. And you can feel free to talk about us, even if we're not on the call with you, as your worksite long-term care team who helps you with enrollment implementation and communications and educational landing pages, webinars. You're looking at the three people who do the webinars for all of our group long-term care sales that we work with. So feel free to mention us if you're working with us as an extension of your team, and somebody who will help you kind of plan all the way from beginning of implementation to end of enrollment, how things are going to go, and give some peace of mind, right? Because I think that goes a long way as well. That sigh of relief, as we said. But I think that's about it, unless anybody has any last minute questions or anything else they'd like to say to wrap it up. I think we can get you out of here. Anything from you guys, Mark or Wendy?
Well, thanks for everyone, and the participation as always was great. So
Yeah,
again, keep shouting out when we can assist, and thanks for letting us use you, Carly, as an example for everyone else to learn from as well.
100%.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Carly. Yeah, anytime you want to study hall, anything like that, this is probably the easiest way to get a hold of us in the middle of the day on a Thursday. So don't be afraid to come in with any case questions you have, or if you want to be made an example of in a very good way. So thank you all for being here. Be well, and we will talk to you this time next week.
All right, to see
See
Take
you all.
care.
everyone.
Have a good
Bye.
one.
See you, Steve.